You're listening to KZUM News on 89.3 KZUM Lincoln and KZUM HD. Good afternoon and welcome to today's edition of KZUM News, an hour dedicated to learning more about what is going on in Lincoln and the surrounding areas. I am the news director and your host, Amantha Dickman. As part of plans to integrate local art to the Lincoln Transportation and Utilities Temporary Transportation Center located at 11th and L Streets, local artist Hannah Ashburn is preparing for the ribbon-cutting ceremony of the mural she was contracted to complete. The mural, which depicts sunflowers spanning the south-facing side of the building, was completed Friday, June 20th. We sat down with Hannah to talk about the process from start to finish. Now, we've got an intensive multimodal transportation center that is currently being built. And as they are working on that, LTU has a temporary transport center located off 11th and L. Right now, they are working on integrating local artwork into that project, and that's kind of where you come in, Hannah. So, Hannah Ashburn, independent artist, now muralist, as well as you just said. Tell me how you got started in art, for just to begin.
Yeah, for sure. Well, not to go like all the way back, but I feel like I've always been drawing and sketching since I was a kid. Like I've always loved art. I would take like the creative craft part of assignments very, very seriously. So, in high school, I was excited to do art, but that was one of the first things that they cut in my school. So I didn't actually have a formal art class until college. So I would say my art journey started at Union College on 48th Street. That's where I graduated and did my undergraduate work in studio arts. So drawing and painting, that's where that like illustrative love comes from, and painting love. And then as a lot of us do, we get thrown into a different type of jobs. Then I worked retail, and then I went back to grad school and did some art history work, graduate work at UNL. So that's kind of the short and long of it. But so I've been a professional artist for about 10 years now. I think I graduated 2017 with undergrad. So about 10 years.
And 10 years is quite a long time to be in the field. Now, you mostly do fiber arts and illustrations, you said. So
Yes.
How did you get involved with this project to work on this mural that is located at 11th and L?
Yeah, so weird, right? So last year, when Lincoln Arts Festival was still a thing, I'm hoping it comes back in the future because that was such an incredible resource for me. But back when they did their emerging artist program in the rail yard, they would have like a 2-day weekend where they would set up all of those tents and stuff. I was part of that. So I was asked to be an emerging artist. Like I applied for it and got accepted. And so they provided me like tent and materials, and I just had to show up with my artwork. Well, I got accepted as a fiber artist. So I have a tent full of fiber art and I linked up with my contact at StarTran, Kayla Krusky, I believe her last name is, and she was very like encouraging about my artwork, very excited, and asked if I ever did like mural work because in my bio, that I have on my website and then like at my tent, it said like, oh, I also love to, find trash and found objects to and from my bus stop on my way to work and stuff. So I have a whole nother series of like found object work that kind of encompasses the bus and transportation and like that element of it. So she was really excited that I was a StarTran user. So that's how it first started. Like, oh, cool. I see you have some sort of like illustrative background. I see you're working in a different media, but like, would you be excited about this type of project because you're an active user? And I was like, heck yeah.
So you're a big public transportation user, and that's kind of how she zoomed in on you, so to
Yes.
speak. Um, what draws you to public transportation? Since that is a big key to why
Yeah.
they chose you.
Yeah. And I think like public transit is such a vital resource in all of our communities. So anywhere that I've lived, whether I was using public transit or my parents were, we relied on that because like growing up low income, that is such a vital like experience and vital way to like get to work and get to those extracurricular things. I think it goes back even further. Like my great grandfather was a trolley conductor in Pittsburgh. And so my grandma like hounded us with like public transit, public transit. That's like the only way to go. And then my partner, who's originally grew up in Lincoln, his grandfather retired from StarTran as like a bus driver. So it kind of runs in the family a little bit too. I don't know if that's cheesy to say, but anyway, I've been using transit for years and it's really been important and vital to me because there's been times when like I couldn't have held down a job or gotten to work without the bus, or I couldn't have gone and met up with friends or done First Fridays or like those networking things without it, you know? And for years, I didn't have a car or any like secondary form of transportation or primary form of transportation. So it's really like an independence thing. It's a like necessity or like a necessary thing for a lot of people, and it can be really liberating to be a public transit user. And also, it's greener, like you can literally jump on the bus and know that, like, wow, my carbon footprint's just a little bit smaller today.
And so, Kayla, she reached out to you because she was a big fan of the fiber arts booth that you had at the Lincoln Arts Council of Fair thing. Sorry, words
Yeah,
just completely failed me there.
words. I
But
know what you're saying.
yeah, she was a big fan of your fiber arts booth there. She saw that you were a public transportation user. She said, "Hey, this is what I want to do." So, were you nervous at all about this new medium for murals, or were you just really excited?
I mean, definitely both. Like, I kind of, I don't know if you call it I wouldn't call it weaponizing confidence. I would just call it confidence because I'm like, oh yeah, I can pick up that. I can figure that out. So I wasn't nervous about like the illustrative work or the painting work per se, but like I have never worked on that large of a scale. Like I haven't done a mural before and I haven't necessarily worked too much on like a brick facade. So that was a big learning curve. In the project as itself. But yeah, I was just kind of nervous, but really excited to like get the plan and this idea off the ground. And it's kind of been a year in the making, which I'm learning that for like government is very fast, but for like timeline and like artistry and like booking and like myself, I was like, this is taking forever, you know?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, government contracts do not move very fast.
No. And I was like, oh, that's totally like a totally different like aspect of like work that, excited to like branch out into too, but like definitely learning curves on both like the, the timelines and the materials. So
Sure. I totally get
as you
that.
know.
I do. So Kayla comes to you. She says, "We want to do this mural." Did you know what you wanted to do already in terms of design, or did you kind of draft multiple designs to present them to LTU?
Yeah, so it was very loosely based. They just wanted to know like the why behind certain pieces and like loosely tied into this new like redefining of like transition and transportation. So with that in mind, I believe I submitted 4 or 5 designs that were different. So the one that's on the hub now, like on the wall now, was the design that they presented to their, their drivers and people working for them, and was by and large the favorite one. So that was cool just to see like which ones that they gravitated towards, because I submitted that design, which is a little bit more of like a realistic like flower design with the intention or like the idea behind like transition and preservation. So like transition of like spaces, um, preservation of public services and green spaces and things like that. But the other designs that I submitted were along those same lines too, but there's like a more abstract design. There was one that tied more into the business side of it, where it was very like simplistic. Um, and I'm trying to think what else. There's a couple other ones, but I submitted a few, and then the decision making process was from their end, if you will. So it was really cool to be like sketching it out like freehand on the wall, or like starting to paint it, and some of the bus drivers coming up and be like, I voted for that one. That was really cool.
I bet, especially because you've been out there working the last
Yeah.
couple of weeks while folks are driving by, um, and in a variety of weathers as well.
Yes.
Does the weather, I mean, obviously you can't be out there working in the rain, right? Like,
Right.
because it would impact the paint itself. But like,
Yeah.
does extreme heat or extreme cold kind of impact that process as well?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I wish I kind of had some of the extreme cold. Just kidding. But the one of the days it was like inching towards 100, and I was like, I'm gonna stay out and paint. And it was so hot that the paint was like drying on my brush and getting really like thick in viscosity. So I left some of my screw ups in the mural just because I was like, this is a process, and I feel like this can be part of the story. But if you see, there's a few paint textures that are a little wonky. So like if you get up real close, you can probably see like, ooh, Hannah painted that in like 100 degrees. But weather is such a big thing. Like I was forced to take breaks, which was really nice. So like when it rained, I was like, okay, maybe I do go get a coffee and sit for a little bit and just like chill out. So the universe really told me to like calm down.
And the nice thing about Nebraska weather is you wait 20 minutes and it changes anyway.
Exactly. It changes on a dime. So I was like, well, I'll be out there again in an hour or so.
So how long have you been working on the actual painting process, like part of this process?
Yeah. So let me pull up my calendar, because I think as of yesterday, when I quote unquote finished it, besides doing the last like signing stuff, I think it's been 2 weeks. So I started just grabbing the materials and sketching it out on Thursday. Yeah, Thursday the 5th. So, and then I took a, couple days of the weekend off, and um yeah, so roughly about 2 weeks.
And then, of course, you just said that yesterday, Thursday, June 19th, you are more or less finished with the piece. You have
Yes, I had an internal goal to finish, and I was like, I will do it before the sun goes down.
and all you have left to add is you mentioned your signature and your QR code, right?
Yeah, so I'm going to link like the QR code will drop right to a portion of my website that will talk about the project and like the intent behind it. I think that's important, because when you're walking by, you're like, that's really sweet, but like you might not know like the why behind it. So that's something that I really want to do. And then of course sign it, because I work so hard on it.
And now, with the project officially completed, I know you mentioned that you plan to have a ribbon cutting ceremony. Have you worked out some more of those details since the last time that we spoke? That way folks
Yeah.
know what to expect?
Yes, I have. So originally, like LTU and StarTran were like, we're only going to do certain aspects of social media for you, because originally we had talked about maybe making it a big to do, but they decided to scale back, which that's fine. But the local business the hot mess, has been really helpful and like really supportive of the project and making sure that this hub is accessible and really a nice thing. So they're going to help me host a ribbon cutting kind of like hurrah, like we did it and we're like moving forward with this project. So that's going to be Thursday, the 26th. So next Thursday, this coming Thursday, I guess you could say that. Thursday, the 26th at 7 p.m. We'll see if I get to like some nice photos and like prints of the mural. That's like a goal, but we'll see. No stress, super easy. And it's just a big celebration of like a long time coming to make the hub really beautiful. So, yes, Thursday, June 26th, 7 p.m.
Well,
Meet at the mural.
I drove by. It looks fantastic. And of course, we got some photos with you at the mural, and I will go back and try to take some photos as well for social media. That way,
Yeah,
folks
please.
can check it out, see what we're talking about, since I know radio isn't exactly conducive to seeing that when we're talking about it. But Hannah, thank you so much for joining us to talk more about your work. We appreciate you taking time out of your day.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for having me. And thanks for supporting public art and public transit. And hopefully, like, together we can solve some of the issues that are going on. Like, public bathrooms need to happen. So think about that.
Always planning.
Yes.
As LTU works to build the multimodal transportation hub that has been years in the making, the City of Lincoln's bus system has transitioned to operate out of the temporary transportation center established at 11th and L Streets. But even temporary spaces can be welcoming. Liz Elliott, director of LTU, joined us to talk more about the integration of local art to the temporary transportation center. So right now, you are working on the process of building the multimodal transport center, which has been in process for a couple years now. And as you work on that, you have this temporary transport center located at 11th and L. First, can you just kind of talk to folks about that temporary transport center that you've got and at that location?
Right. So moving to a temporary transfer center was not necessarily part of the plan, but there's so much exciting development going on in downtown Lincoln that there's currently construction going on 11th Street in between N and O streets. And that south half of that block is basically a hole in the ground right now if you walk by. And during demolition, we realized that it's really not a safe location for our bus. And it's also not a good way to recruit more riders because there's dust, it's loud, cranes, and not the safest location. So we worked with the developer as part of that construction project to find a new location. And we looked all across town. I think we looked at something like 14 or 15 different sites to see if they would work. And for one reason or another, they ruled themselves out, whether it was on the wrong one-way street, the property owners wouldn't let us be there, it didn't have enough space, or we would have to remove all of the trees in the area. So a lot of different reasons why we couldn't make it work. And so this location where we're at, which is 11th and L, was a vacant building. Satel's used to be there. The other across the street was a city parking garage. So there really was as minimal as possible impact on other businesses and other things in the area, which is what we were trying to do, is have the least amount of intrusion into other businesses and residents in the area. And so this location really was the best location. It's not without its own challenges. And so that was something we had to work through as we were planning this.
Sure. And when you were putting that temporary transport center together, I know that you were kind of trying to work out the bathroom situation and heating and cooling
Right.
for riders there. And at the time, nobody had talked about having a mural. At least I don't think there was talk of
Right.
that. Was that just kind of a fun thing that you decided after you got started that you wanted to do?
Right. So the old location didn't have any amenities. This new location allowed us to do a little bit, but also keeping in mind that this is not our forever home. this is not where we want to be long term. We've got our multimodal transportation center that's going to be between 9th and 10th at the south end of the county complex. And so we wanted to look, and as part of the public engagement that we were doing, I think it was at a city council public hearing in April of 2024, when the idea came up of how can we really become part of the neighborhood while we're there and add some additional value. And someone came up with the idea of maybe you could do a mural. And we thought that was a great idea. We want to be a positive neighbor in this area. And, public art and things around town that you see, there's always this cool art component. So we thought, let's try and make that happen.
And that's where Hannah Ashburn enters the picture. She's the local artist that you chose to do the mural down there at the 11th and L Temporary Transport Center. How did you meet Hannah? Was she kind of already on your radar, or is there like a pool of artists you were looking at and she was the one that you went with?
This really is just when the stars align and we lucked out with Hannah. It's great to have a local artist. That's always a great way to add. But the other great thing with Hannah is that she rides the bus. So she truly understood the bus rider experience and the value that art and public transportation really bring to the community. So luckily, one of our StarTran employees, Kayla Kresge, she knew Hannah in a way. They started talking to each other at an event here in town, I think the Arts Festival. And Hannah was very interested. And so we really just kind of lucked out, and it was just perfect timing for everyone.
And of course, she's been working on that for the last couple of days. I went down and already saw her progress. But when did the conceptualization process begin for that mural? Has it been in the making for a year or two?
Yeah, so back in 24 at the Arts Festival, that's kind of where the original seed was planted with Hannah and our team. Then in probably late June, Kayla and Hannah got together. They kind of talked it through what that collaboration could be. Hannah came out and looked at the facility, and they kind of just talked about it. And then probably early fall, September of 24, Hannah provided us some different drafts, different ideas that she thought her vision, the neighborhood and public transit would really kind of come together. So in February of this year, StarTran staff looked at all of the designs and picked the sunflowers that you see there. It just really was a good match. Her concept drawings were beautiful, and we thought that what better way to recognize and bring some vibrancy to that area.
Is it just because of the bright colors that you chose it, or is there some symbolic purpose behind it as well? I just ask as somebody who does art in her spare time.
Yeah, to me, my thoughts on is, it's sunflowers, which it has a near and dear place in my heart. When I graduated high school, I put a sunflower on my graduation cap. And so there's that, but there's also the growth of StarTran and kind of the blooming that we are having with the multimodal transportation center on the horizon, and kind of just the vibrancy we want public transportation to be here in the city of Lincoln. So it was a little bit of everything, but for me personally, I love sunflowers, and I was happy to see it there as well as in one of her concepts.
And then, of course, you were talking earlier about the current construction site for the multimodal is kind of a big hole in the ground, and you've got that lovely alleyway that kind of branches off to the north of it. Are you looking at potentially having local artists do murals there as well, inspired by this piece that Hannah has done?
So the place on 11th and in on that corner, that one is actually a private development. That's not where our multimodal transportation center is going.
Oh.
But we are in the process of looking at some downtown corridor concepts, and are there other areas for public art displays in the downtown area? So it's something that we really are exploring. We think, public art always adds an extra something special to gathering places. And so I hope to see more of this in the future, maybe in the downtown area. So hopefully this is going to be the start of something cool.
So basically, local artists that have ideas, we need to send them your way.
We'll hopefully be able to find more places in the future.
And nope, there goes that question. Just gone out of my head. All right. I know Hannah had mentioned something about a ribbon cutting ceremony. Have you gotten any details hammered out about that, or is that something that she's organizing?
That's something that Hannah is organizing, but we're really excited to see the community come together to celebrate this mural and the creativity it brings to transit places, and hopefully is the start of other places similar to this, because we realize, as I mentioned, that public art plays a really important role in making our city more vibrant. Bringing that local artist flair is always such a cool way to bring personal connections to the community. So I'm excited for the ribbon cutting, and I hope that the community is as excited as we are.
Perfect. And I don't have any other questions, but do you have anything you'd like to add today about that mural?
Really just want to thank Hannah. She is an extraordinary artist, and really her connection with public transit and her creativity just is really exciting to be a part of. And I really appreciate her willingness to dedicate her time, her craft, and I know she was doing it in some really hot temperatures. So we're lucky that she wanted to do this.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Liz. We appreciate you taking time out of your week to talk to us about that upcoming mural that is hopefully going to be finished in just a couple of days. That's what Hannah tells me, but we'll see if the heat persists.
Yes, I hope she can get it done before the really extreme hot temperatures start. So, well, thank you for sharing the message about this.
Of course. And have a lovely afternoon. With the mural completed, Hannah plans to host a ribbon cutting ceremony for her work on Thursday, June 26th at the Hot Mess. Folks can stop by to see the mural and check out the in-progress photos through KZUM social media page. With that being said, we're going to take a break. Once we come back, we'll be learning about Civic Nebraska's recently released 2025 Nebraska Civic Health Index. Stay tuned to learn more, and we'll be right back.
Support for KZUM comes from Lincoln Pharmacy, a local neighborhood pharmacy located at 33rd and A Streets, offering medication therapy management, adherence packaging, medical supplies, prescription delivery, COVID and flu vaccines, and more. Open Monday through Friday from 8:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Saturdays from 10 till 4. More information is available at lincoln-rx.com.
Life-saving blood is a gift only volunteer donors can give. Right now, Nebraska Community Blood Bank needs you to donate blood. Visit ncbb.org today to schedule your donation.
And welcome back to today's episode of KZUM News. My name is Samantha Dickman. I am the news director and your host for the second half of today's show. Civic Nebraska, a local nonprofit working to build civic engagement in our state, released the 2025 Nebraska Civic Health Index on Monday, June 16th. The study provides a detailed look at how Nebraskans engage with one another, their institutions, and the democratic process. Sitting down with us this afternoon is Alan Klopek, the Rural Civic Health Program Manager with Civic Nebraska and one of the primary contributing authors to the 2025 Nebraska Civic Health Index. Welcome, Alan. Works like this study take a lot of coordination. This is a particularly data-driven piece that is looking to identify how Nebraskans engage civically. Can you talk about the process you and your partners on the 2025 Nebraska Civic Index used to gather this data?
Yeah, so our main partner with this index is the National Conference on Citizenship. They provide a significant amount of data as well as some of the main theming behind this. So they're responsible for some of the changes. If you're familiar with our previous Civic Health Index releases, we have these subsections called civic pillars, or basically kind of the areas that we break this term civic health down into. So those new pillars are things like civic access, or how we participate in our communities, civic action, do we volunteer? The other two are civic knowledge, staying with people. How well do you know your community? And then one of the most, I think, important ones that is kind of up and coming is civic trust, or how well do we trust our government on the local, state, and national scale?
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I was just about to say, how do we define civic engagement, like healthy civic engagement? What is the baseline there? Um,
It's hard because there really isn't a baseline, and so much of this data can be anecdotal. So, what we do is we work with a lot of our partners, whether that be Josie Safer over at UNL and the public policy team there, or LJ McElvey with the rural poll and Nebraska Extension. We really have a lot of great resources, especially through our university system in our state. And they go above and beyond to help us understand and present this data in a way that is tangible for Nebraskans.
So, keeping in mind that it's a little hard to define what a healthy baseline is, you know, it's easy to say, here is the data, but it's a lot harder to have a conversation with someone and have them ask you, why does it matter? Why should this data matter to me? So, for the folks out there who are listening to this, they're trying to kind of navigate what civic engagement looks like and how that applies to them. What would you tell them?
I would say a lot of this could do with introspection. So, in a previous role, I served as the city administrator for my hometown of Fullerton, Nebraska. Information like this would be very useful in who's participating, who's being represented. Do people have trust in their local government? I would also like to compare and contrast anecdotally. Is this something that I feel is applicable to my community? Do I feel like just because it's saying one of the things that I do want to brag about real quick, a little high note is Nebraska. We did very good in volunteering. We were the seventh state as far as out of all 50 to, for entities or states that like to, or people that like to volunteer. I guess what I would say is that it really helps us do inner examination as to who we are, what's going well, what's not going well. While I mentioned volunteering being up, political donations are down, charitable or donations are down. We have some key amounts that we kind of charter in on or key in on, specifically like political or religious or any sort of donation above $25. That's kind of a tangible amount for people when they want to give something. That's down significantly. What would that tell us is that maybe times are getting harder for people. Maybe families don't have quite the money to expend on some of these things. It could also just say, hey, that's our Nebraska spirit. We don't donate money, but we donate time. So I think it's really good or the Civic Health Index is very good for figuring out who we are as a state and how we stack up against the other 50 or 49. Sorry.
No, you're good. Easy to make that one. Before we talk about what civic health looks like for Nebraskans specifically, first I want to ask, does geographic region matter here? For example, do places further out west have different indicators when compared to, say, further east in the state? Do you see that kind of difference in region?
Oh, absolutely. One of the biggest ways you kind of see that is sometimes income, but also how people are donating their time. It seems like rural folks are a little bit more resilient or willing to pull together over some political barriers, we'll say, whereas that might not necessarily be the case in your more urban or suburban environments. there's the rural poll again with Nebraska Extension really helped us break out the difference in I hate to say the western and eastern split in our state. To that so much of our state is population-wise density in greater Nebraska, not in greater Nebraska, and in that small section of the state. So I think it really helps us understand the differences between those two.
Sure. And maybe the way I actually wanted to put it there is in terms of population density, not necessarily geographic region. You mentioned that cities, those urban areas, have a harder time pulling together. Do you have speculation as to why that is? Is that just because population density makes it harder to, create niche communities within large city blocks?
I think there's a couple different things at play. I can speak a little bit more on the rural side, being as that's what I'm familiar with. And in rural communities, you tend to wear a lot of hats. You might not only know that person as your neighbor, they might have also been your child's Cub Scout leader. They might have also been the city secretary. A lot of times in small communities, you have to wear a lot of roles and wear a lot of different hats to make up for those roles that are missing. So I think there's kind of an innate need just out of a survival instinct of we have to pull together. If we don't, who else will? But it's not that urban or suburban folks can't pull together. I think it's just a little bit harder, and there's a lot more things at play, right? In a community organization for like a community of Fullerton, like my size, we might have 15 to 10 people, and that'd be a good attendance per meeting. Your Lincolns or Omahas, if you were to get 10 people for a meeting like a Lincoln City Council, I think it'd be a pretty big concern, So the population density definitely makes it a little bit harder.
Sure. And you're absolutely right. 10 people to a city council meeting, it'd be like, wow, this is a really empty room. Now, of course, you have those 4 pillars that you kind of use to identify how folks engage civically. You mentioned it earlier: civic trust, civic access, civic action, and civic knowledge. What areas do Nebraskans excel in? You already mentioned that we do great with volunteering, not so great with financial donations there. Are there other areas that Nebraskans do really well in?
Yeah, civic knowledge was one that kind of caught me off guard. I wasn't really, I don't know. I think especially sometimes growing up in a rural area, there's an expectation or people don't think people consume news or anything out here, or they're, being an ostrich and putting their head in the sand. But Nebraskans stay very informed. Nearly 70% of Nebraskans report consuming news frequently, which also puts us as the 7th highest nationally. I guess that I would say we have a commitment to staying informed. The one weird kind of thing about that is there are sections of demographics that are disengaging with that, specifically women and residents aged 30 to 44 in Nebraska. That was one of the key breakouts we had, was that they are less likely to engage in traditional news media.
And I will say that as somebody who works in news, we do see a lot of news fatigue, I guess is the term for it. Do you think that is what is happening there, or do you think there's just like other life factors that are presenting a barrier for those folks?
It can be a little bit of everything on that. I know on the national front, a lot of people do feel a news fatigue, but on the state and local levels, I would say Nebraskans feel as invested, if not more. Especially the farther west you go, it gets very hard to get local news sources. So some of those, papers are covering multiple county regions. So I think the news is such an important way of how we connect to our place too. So it's shifting and changing, but it's not that we are disconnecting.
Sure, absolutely. Especially, again, as somebody in news, we see this trend of shifting from traditional printing to a digital space. So I'm sure some of that is a little hard to track, right? Because you can't get that kind of data from those online platforms, or at least not easily without going directly to them to get that data.
And would they skew that data if they had it too, right? I think it's we're in a transition period, I think would be the way to put it. So we're trying to take in data the old way, working with what we've got and what people are reporting, and then trying to listen to folks and see if this is what they're seeing in their communities. Do they feel like 70% of Nebraskans are keeping up to date on the news? That's what we're really trying to gain out of this civic health index is how do we stack up and is this accurate? Is this what Nebraska looks like?
So, civic knowledge, volunteering, these are two areas that Nebraskans really excel in. Are there any other areas that we do really well in as a state?
Oh, we connect with our neighbors, but we don't really go out of our way to help them. That was one of the things that stuck out to me. We'll talk with our neighbors about everything but politics, and then we will. This is where the data can get a little hard, but it's specifically like going out of their way to do a favor for or to help with a task. And maybe that's more of a Nebraska pride thing of not asking for it.
Sure. I mean, I don't know about you. I grew up in a family where my parents were like, you don't talk about politics or religion because it's impolite. So I think that's a fairly good representation of the ideology that I grew up with. I don't know if you would say the same, but
I would say the same. A good friend of mine, Charles Liskey, once said, "In Nebraska, self-reliance is a virtue, so we never ask for help."
oh, but then there's the downside, right? Of those struggling community bonds. And
Right. But if we're not willing to ask for help, how do we know when the other side is struggling? How do we come across that? And I think that's where a lot of our polarization has come from. We are maybe afraid to ask for help or afraid to ask for input from the other side. Um, I mean, it's not hard to see our unicameral did not function that well this year. I think that is a very large issue with a lot of people. And while there was a lot of talking, there wasn't a lot of asking. How do we bridge this? How do we make this work? How do we actually come across this problem?
so would you say that this communication aspect is one of the biggest ways that Nebraskans struggle to engage civically?
I think that, and I think it's time. There's a lot of we are asked more and more of in our lives, whether that be from different organizations, donating your time or energy or volunteerism or student activities in children's organizations. It is hard to find the time to give to everything that needs the time. And it seems like that might be part of Nebraskans' biggest struggle is to find the time for everything. I think that's why people are happy to volunteer so much is it gives them a lot of times maybe a parent can volunteer work at a softball game or on the concession stand. If it's their schedule, they can still see their kid play, and it keeps food on the table because they don't have to donate the money and they can, keep going that way.
Sure. So identifying that communication, time, and then those donation rates, those are some things that we really struggle with. I guess the question is, how do we address those struggles for our state? How do we use this information and apply it to our citizens' lives? Do you have any ideas? I know that's a very abstract question. Like you're like, I'm a data person. I just wrote the thing.
I think it could come across in a few different ways. I'm a civically engaged individual. I believe a lot in giving back to my community because it's given so much to me. I think you can do that in a couple different ways. I think talking to our neighbors about bigger issues than some of these surface level things. Um, you know, to get back to that civic trust section real quick, I ran across something I wanted to mention with that. While we do have close-knit communities, there is an uneven confidence in our institutions. We have those strong interpersonal ties with our neighbors that I was talking about, with 1/3 regularly spending time with our neighbors, that's 6 nationally, and 85.5% frequently spending time with family and friends. Only 25% of those same people will work with neighbors to improve their communities. I think there's a lot of little things that we can pull together to do. In the Civic Health Index, there's some different stories of communities pulling together to fight societal issues, whether that be, not to brag, my community of Fullerton and our nonprofit daycare, or the community of Genoa and their struggle with deciding whether or not to build a new school. that school bill bond passed by one vote. So if one person had not decided to go out and vote that day, that school bill or that school would not be being built there. I think it's important to emphasize the role one person could have in their community and how much of a change that can make.
Absolutely. And I mean, this is part of why civic engagement is so important, right? It's about representing everyone within the community. I do think that that statistic you gave about civic trust is really interesting. Can you give it again?
Yeah. So 1/3 of us Nebraskans report regularly spending time with our neighbors. That's six nationally. And 85.5 of us report that we spend time frequently with friends and family, while only 24.6 report having worked with neighbors or friends to improve their communities. While that is slightly above the national average, I think that's an area we can shoot for. We're so happy to volunteer in our state. Maybe we just figure some new steps out.
Sure. And I suppose I'm wondering, I obviously I looked at the index, but I'm blanking on it right now. When it comes to civic trust, obviously relationship with our neighbors, relationship with our community is very important. However, is trust in government figures also kind of nestled under that civic trust branch?
Yes. And if you go to the report, which I would like to plug here for a second, civicnebraska.org/civic health index, um, you'll see some very interesting details. And I guess to simplify it, it seems like the closer we get to the local level, the more trust and faith people have in their local or in their institutions. The farther away we get from it, the and I think that would make sense, right? Because the further away, the more abstracted it is. It gets harder to see the forest through the trees. Whereas in town, oh, I know Jim, he's on the school board, or I know Becky Sue, she's our city council member. So it gets a little complicated, but Nebraskans do have a pretty similar trust level. So I found that statistic that might help with a little bit of this. Confidence in local leadership remains relatively high. We had 60% of our rural residents viewing their leaders as effective in solving problems. Only 9% expressed that same level or expressed a similar trust in national leadership.
That's a huge difference. 60 to 9%.
Yes. So I again, we've got a lot going on, a lot of good things going on in Nebraska, and we've got some things to build on. But I think our state has a good foundation to build on.
Sure. And like you said, it's very easy to trust and interact with your local representatives, the people that you elect every voting season. There we go. English hard. And it's a little harder to, trust those state representatives who are representing us in Congress and in the Senate. For those representatives, how do you think that we can build that trust out more? It's great that we trust our local representatives. How do we get that same trust across the board?
I would say it would have to feel like they are there for the people. And there are times it does not feel like that is the case. Maybe it is self-serving or a party interest. Um, but getting out and being with the people and communicating issues and goals and what they're working towards, I think what people are really clamoring for is transparency and a path forward. Um, Times are tough economically for a lot of people. And I think if you could say, hey, there's a plan, we just have to last a little bit and fix this, people might be more willing to grant trust to that if they knew what the process looked like.
And I guess the other question that kind of stems from that is, do Nebraskans think that transparency doesn't exist, or are they just not aware of it?
I think that transparency is there a little bit, but it's tough to see, right? Anytime you add multiple steps to view transparency, it isn't transparency, right? I really like that a lot of our local leaders are making efforts to host town halls here, where that does not feel like it is currently the trend nationally. I would say that helps with transparency. But I guess being in their communities more than being on the television screen would be a way to add that.
Sure. And maybe part of that is also, I don't want to be that person who's like, yeah, social media for everything, because obviously social media is not an answer to everything. However, it is a tool that we have as a community, and perhaps there are ways to better utilize it as a tool.
Oh, 100%. I think anything you can do to communicate, because it really feels like a lot of what's going right now is a lot of breakdowns in communication.
Hmm. And isn't that just your least favorite trope in any kind of media?
I think it's hard. To so many people, words can mean different things, or some terms get loaded. I think right now, in the past 10 years, think of how much our vocabulary has changed. Certain words are in, certain words are out, certain words, may not be politically as savvy or as hasty, we'll say.
Mhm. Sure. And part of that is, finding good ways to communicate with folks that transcend slang or generations or whatever barriers folks might face. So we talked a bit about communication barriers. So we also have time and then those donation rates as areas in which we have decreased involvement. What kind of barriers might people be facing in terms of money presently?
Money presently, a lot of times you have to think of if somebody has to commute to go to a voting poll or anything like that. I've got a lot of family out in western Nebraska, and while a good chunk of that is, mail-in ballots, if that is removed, their polling place could be more than 45 minutes away. If situations where it is difficult to find the time, say a single father is working 3 or 4 jobs to keep food on the table, when does he have time to actually get out and vote or be civically engaged? So I think enabling people to have the time to be engaged in their communities would go a long way. I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Well, yes. I mean, it was kind of a vague question now that I've said it out
Mhm.
loud, but we've been talking about the different barriers to communication. And of course, we've
Mm.
also talked about how time and money are two other areas that Nebraskans have seen a decrease of engagement in. So I guess I'm wondering, obviously, you talked a
Yeah,
little
and
bit about
I
both.
think a third area to, or not third, fourth area to really push in on that. Oh, there we go. We good? Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
I think another area to push in on that is we're very active in some unusual political areas. So boycotting has really become a popular way to become politically active in our state. Um, so let me check this real quick here. I'm trying to remember what the boycott stat is. I want to say it's a quarter of Nebraskans have reported participating in a boycott, and that's up an additional 8% over the last 4 years. I don't want to say that all has to do with the Bud Light boycott that went on earlier this year. It may also have to do with John Deere right to repair and things like that. But it is something interesting, and I think that maybe shows a couple of the ways that the that finances and time touch our state and
Sure.
our lack of participation in it at times.
Which is really interesting. I would have thought protests would be the thing that is up, not boycotting.
And it is hard to get data on protests. Anecdotally, I think that protests would probably be up, but we unfortunately do not have any of that data at this time.
Is that just because people are less likely to report participating in protests, or are there particular factors that contribute to why that data is so hard to track?
I, I'm not 100% sure, to be honest with you. I think people would probably be hesitant at this point to say whether or not they're protesting. Probably the political climate more than anything, if I'm guessing.
Sure. And part of it could also potentially be that, I guess, as somebody who's, at the Capitol fairly often, who lives not far from the Capitol, whenever there is a protest at the Capitol, there's hundreds of people out there. I can't imagine how difficult it would be to be a data scientist going to this protest, trying to count the hundreds of people actually there and track them. I'm sure that also is part of it, right?
Well, and then do the counter protesters count? Do the police that are also there count? Do the shop owners that are looking out the door count? It's complicated. There's like any data science, it's to be taken with a grain of salt. We can look at it and see if it fits what we're seeing in our state and go from there.
Sure. And then, of course, I do like to just remind folks, because I'm sure we've had people who've tuned in about halfway through this interview. They're just joining us. So you say that, data needs to be taken with a grain of salt. Can you talk about the importance of context to data? And how that plays a role in providing more nuance for folks who are looking at this index?
Yeah, so a lot of data can be easily manipulated based on a few different things, whether that be like, let's say I conduct a survey in this house or I conduct a survey in my house of how many people are eating Cheerios. Well, if there's only one person in the house and there's only one person eating Cheerios, 100% of the people in the house are eating Cheerios. Right. So sample size is very important. Any potential political skewing is important. Language can be a very big thing. When I say you frequently spend a time with your neighbor, what does that mean to you? Is that once a week, twice a week? Maybe that's once a month. There's differences in how we as people process words. But like anything, I think there's a lot to gain from good data and data that we can see reflected in our own community. So I guess I would say that like the data we have gained is very important and it can provide some very useful insights. Should we be using that to make all of our decisions on or putting all of the bet on black here? Probably not.
And part of it is also that the more eyes you have on data, the better it can be, right? It's kind of like the editing process for a newsroom. The more eyes you have on it, the better it is. And you've had several partners help you put this together. Can you kind of remind folks who those partners are who have helped you pull this 2025 Nebraska Civic Health Index together?
Yeah. So I'll again go over a few of the main ones. The main one is the National the National Conference on Citizenship. They provide us with most of the polling data as far as how Nebraskans are active voting. The other main participants or partners were the Nebraska Community Foundation, Nebraska Extension, the Center for Public Research at the University of Nebraska of Omaha, University of Nebraska Public Policy Center, and a few of our special partners who did a lot of our data science. Again, I'd like to thank Josie Schaefer and LJ McAvey.
And of course, as you mentioned earlier, folks can find this study online. All they have to do is go to, can you give me the website one more time?
Yes, civicnebraska.org /2025-index/.
And of course, that is the last reminder I wanted to give listeners for where to find that. I don't have any more questions this afternoon, but Alan, do you have anything you would like to add about your work on the 2025 Nebraska Civic Health Index or anything that we've talked about today?
Just a couple things that we're looking to produce supplemental reports. So if there's areas that you think should be explored in the Civic Health Index, we're trying to Nebraska's got a lot of potential and a lot of organizations want to help it reach that potential. Ways we do that is through examining, looking inward and seeing, is this accurate? What other, I guess all I'm saying is what else could we be looking for? And if you do feel like this does or doesn't match your community, please reach out and let us know.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, Alan. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to tell us more about the index and talk to us about civic engagement in Nebraska.
Well, thank you for having me.
We are fast approaching the end of the hour, so here are your reminders for today. The KZUM Newsroom is always open to hearing about any questions, concerns, suggestions, or even any story ideas that you might want to share with us. All you have to do is give us a call at 402-474-5086, extension line 6. If you give us a call and we aren't available, don't forget to leave a voicemail. Or, if you aren't much of a phone person, you can also find our social media handles and more newsroom information at kzum.org under that About tab. Speaking of our website, if you happen to miss a show, you can always head to the KZUM News tab, where we archive all of our shows and include a transcript with links to that day's content. And lastly, I just want to give a shout out to Jack Rodenberg of the Rodenberg Music Experience. He put together all of the amazing original music that our news program uses. So once again, thank you, Jack. That wraps up our reminders for now. As you head out into the world, I hope you have a lovely day. Thank you for listening, and we hope you'll join us next time. You just finished listening to KZUM News, an original production of KZUM Radio that airs every Saturday at 11 a.m. Coming up next is Beta Radio, so stay tuned.